Everything begins in a dungeon where a monster that looks like a rabbit attacks a boy, but ends up being easily defeated by his sword. Two other rabbits attack as well, but they're also taken down without difficulty. After making these movements, the human realizes that maybe he isn't as out of shape as he thought, and that he can still manage as a swordsman. When 5 goblins appear before him, the boy sees that it's time to test his support spells, so he casts Strength Increase, an ability capable of buffing his physical attributes or strengthening his equipment. According to the man, every adventuring group needs at least one member capable of using this type of technique, because it's very important to have someone who can raise the attack and defense of the whole team. By the way, by using this magic, he manages to defeat all the enemies one by one without taking any damage. However, even though he praises the qualities of this kind of enchantment, he admits that it has one central weakness: time. After 3 minutes of fighting, the enchantment ends, and when more goblins start appearing in the dungeon, he has to repeat the same ability to stay ahead in the battle. While he destroys his new opponents, the human thinks about how an individual's resistance to magic affects the duration of their enchantment. In his case, it's only 3 minutes, and sadly that forces him to constantly watch the time so he can reactivate the spell whenever it ends, making enchanters like him always fight an endless battle against the clock. The boy is able to handle a sword, which isn't common for someone of his class, but this limitation is still a weakness. And speaking of weaknesses, that's exactly why the young man was kicked out of his adventuring group without ceremony by its leader, Oliver. Remembering that day with anger, the enchanter argued that the two of them were childhood friends who had always fought together. But Oliver confessed that during all that time, he only gave Orhan a few chances because they came from the same village, and that from now on, they would go their separate ways. Annalie and Derek, the other 2 members of the team, were more direct in making it clear that Orhan was only slowing everyone down, so Oliver threw in the towel and admitted that he was expelling his childhood friend because he wasn't strong enough. Unable to believe what he was hearing, Orhan remembered how he formed that team with Oliver 8 years ago, and how they reached S rank in a short time, becoming the first group to reach the 94th floor of the Great Southern Labyrinth, so much so that, because of that feat, they started being called the Heroes Party. With that memory in mind, Orhan acknowledged that maybe he wasn't strong enough. But if he wasn't, then no one in the group was. Oliver interrupted his friend to emphasize that they hadn't really understood the importance of an enchanter to the team until that joint attack last month, when they saw how incredible the enchanters from the other S-rank groups were, while Orhan was weak. Orhan admitted he wasn't that good because his real profession was swordsman. But even then, he developed his own original magic, not wanting to hear excuses. Derek and Annalie cut him off aggressively and reminded him that he only changed professions because he was worse than Oliver with a sword. But even in his new class, he didn't stand out. In response, Orhan argued that he only became an enchanter because the group needed one, and because he was the one with the most aptitude for it, pushing himself to the point of developing his own magic to compensate for his weaknesses, ensuring the group survived the deeper floors of the dungeons because of that. Once again, the boy was interrupted, this time by Oliver, who made it clear that they already had a replacement enchanter. This news shook the expelled member deeply, while Annalie commented without the slightest remorse that they were the heroes' party and couldn't be slowed down by someone who couldn't keep up with the rest of the group. Understanding once and for all that there was no place for him anymore, even though he couldn't believe he had been thrown away like that after everything they had been through together, Orhan headed toward the exit, heartbroken. The mage also pointed out that he was able to use some magic and a sword, but everything at a rank, and even so he kept trying to tell everyone what to do, which was quite irritating. According to the girl, people like Orhan are called Jack of all trades, a way to belittle those who only serve to fill in gaps and aren't that important. Filled with hatred over the way he was expelled from his team, Orhan can't swallow being called something like that, a Jack of all trades. Even so, he didn't leave the group empty-handed, since through his own effort, he figured out a way to combine his 2 professions, swordsman and enchanter, becoming an adaptable enough adventurer to make this fusion work effectively. With this technique he acquired, Orhan hopes never again to be called a jack of all trades, and that one day he'll be an adventurer capable of doing anything. After finishing his expedition in the dungeon, the boy registers the teleport crystal so he can return directly to the 7th floor next time. However, when he's about to leave, he runs into a group of adventurers who had to flee from a horde of orcs and were forced to leave a little girl behind. Because if they had stayed, the leader explains, everyone would have been killed. and he decided to prioritize his older companions. Orhan can't help but worry when he hears that, but he tries not to get involved in the problem, convincing himself that the girl was just unlucky to have joined the wrong group. However, he knows very well the pain of being abandoned by your team, and knowing that makes Orhan turn back and decide to intervene. Taken by indignation, he accuses the group of abandoning a teammate and then making excuses so they wouldn't have to save her, the kind of people who irritate the enchanter the most. One of the members responds that he wouldn't have been able to save the girl even if he had stayed behind. And since he's not the type to swallow an insult, he tries to punch Orhan, who easily counters and throws the kid to the ground. Quickly, Orhan asks where the girl was left. Speaking of her, the poor young girl was surrounded by orcs and on the verge of being devoured alive. In a desperate move, she plays her last card by invoking a magical shield to keep the monsters from getting closer, while they tried to break through the barrier and she screamed for her older sister. Suddenly, just as the defense shatters, Orhan arrives, unleashing an arrow shock and driving the enemies back. They immediately start attacking the man instead. As always, Orhan prepares his sword and buffs himself with strength, boost his main battle combination, then engages the orcs in close combat. He also activates technique boost to face opponents of that caliber, which makes the girl confused about this man's profession, since he seems to be both an enchanter and a swordsman at the same time. After defeating some of the orcs, the human casts sharpness boost to make his blade even more capable of tearing through the enemy's flesh. When he returns to the fight, the girl is impressed, having never seen anyone fight like that. Facing this horde, Orhan understands why that low-ranked group ended up running away. But he, on the other hand, knows he can handle this on his own. With that in mind, the swordsman heads into the center of the chaos and performs a series of strikes that shred a large portion of the monsters. Then, he displays technique and speed as he beheads his opponents with extraordinary ease, leaving the little girl more and more astonished by the extent of his talent. Soon enough, when the enchanter finishes off all the orcs, the girl collapses onto the ground in relief and starts crying. After getting the girl safely out of the dungeon, Orhan was simply saying goodbye, not expecting much, but eager to thank him properly for the help he gave. The girl says she is eternally grateful and introduces herself as Sophia Claudel. Hearing her last name, the swordsman finally notices the crest on her tunic, then introduces himself in return as Orhan Dura, a name Sophia really liked. Wanting to make up for the trouble she caused, the girl offers to pay for the boy's dinner. And although he says he didn't help her expecting anything in return, she is so intent on rewarding him somehow that he ends up accepting the invitation, even if a bit awkwardly. So she takes the enchanter to a restaurant whose sign carries the same crest as her clothing. According to the girl, it's a very cheap place, but the food is great. This confirms for Orhan that Sophia Claudel is indeed part of the Silver Rabbits of the Night Sky, one of the biggest and most popular clans in the kingdom of Nohitn. Once inside, Sophia is startled to see her older sister in the establishment, and she explains that she's there for a meeting nearby. She asks who the boy with her sister is, saying Sophia is far too young to be dating. Embarrassed, Sophia panics and can't explain what's going on, until her older sister finally realizes she is standing before Orhan Dura. Scratching his head, Orhan says, "Long time no see, Selma Claudel." Sophia doesn't understand how this guy knows her sister, so he explains that Selma is the leader of the Silver Rabbit's most powerful S-rank, simply the strongest enchanter in the kingdom, largely responsible for making the enchanter profession well known, as well as creating the idea of group members having different roles. In the strategy she created, each team is divided into 3 functions: attackers, who take down the enemy; defenders, who act as shields; and supporters, who provide assistance. This strategy revolutionized the way adventurers carry out their missions, forever changing dungeon expeditions. According to Orhan, the hero's party is no different, and that's why he had to abandon his swordsman profession to become an enchanter. After seeing how strong Selma was in last month's joint assault, that's when his teammates decided Orhan wasn't good enough, which eventually resulted in his expulsion. Thinking to himself, he had already suspected the 2 girls were from the same clan, but had no idea they were sisters. Speaking of that, wearing an angry expression, Selma asks what this brat is doing around her 14-year-old little sister. Not knowing how to explain it properly, Orhan says he really was going to have dinner with Sophia, but that his intentions are pure, interpreting that as him saying her sister isn't good enough for him. Selma loses her temper and starts to raise her voice, so Sophia steps in to calm her down and explains that this man was the one who saved her life. Disappointed that Sophia went into the dungeon alone and without informing the clan, Selma reminds her that the day after tomorrow they were supposed to go together to the Great Labyrinth, and that the younger girl should never have done that. Since she's unharmed, the older sister isn't going to scold her, but insists she never repeat that behavior. Because Orhan saved her sister, Selma thanks him and apologizes for her harshness. Then the three sit together more calmly, and Selma mentions she hasn't seen Orhan since that joint assault last month when they met, and that this is the first time the two have talked like this. Since they're in the same class, they were placed together in that battle, where Selma took command and Orhan served as support. Selma praises the boy's performance that day, and Sophia comments that it sounds like her sister has known this guy for a long time. Selma is surprised that the younger girl had never heard of Orhan Dura, since he is a member of the Heroes Party. The girl is shocked to learn how important he is, but Orhan says he no longer belongs to that team, without revealing the exact reason. Hearing that, Selma asks if he is free, thinking she is about to recruit him for the Silver Rabbits. Orhan doesn't even let the girl finish and declines the invitation immediately, because he wants to stay without a group for a while. Selma explains that the young man misunderstood the situation. In reality, she has the perfect job for the swordsman, accompanying her clan on the training expedition that will begin the day after tomorrow. This expedition is meant to recruit new members, where A rank and S rank veterans will lead these new recruits for 3 days as they descend to the 50th floor of the Great Southern Labyrinth. Impressed that this would take only 3 days, Orhan comments that the best novice adventurers would take 6 months to a year to do the same. Selma then explains that it's possible if they take the shortest route. She also admits that the expedition sponsors are demanding quick results. Orhan points out that even the Silver Rabbits have their own problems, but he still doesn't understand why the sponsors are pressuring the clan so much, even after such a bold promise regarding the expedition. Either way, since she's determined to move forward with this mission, the swordsman thinks that if the goal is to strengthen the clan as a whole, then the novices who wouldn't be able to defeat the floor boss could explore the deeper levels on their own. Selma is impressed that he figured that out based solely on the little she said, which means he's sharper than she thought. In labyrinths, adventurers must defeat the bosses that appear every 10 floors in order to keep descending, and it's very common for recruits to die in fights of that level. But if the more experienced adventurers handle those battles, the novices can simply register at the crystal and proceed to the next floor. In fact, that's why the leader wants Orhan Dura to join this expedition. He asks if it's really okay for someone from the outside to be part of it. At that moment, the woman holds his hands, making him flustered, and emphasizes how much she respects him as an enchanter. The boy is glad to hear that, but it also reminds him of the reason he was expelled from the Heroes Party, not being as strong as Selma during their combined attack. And now she's asking him to return to being an enchanter, which doesn't sound very appealing considering the recent trauma he went through. Because of that, Dura ends up refusing the invitation. But Sophia says she's going as well and insists that he join them, shaking him a little. He promises to think about it more, but emphasizes that he abandoned the enchanter profession to focus on being a swordsman, and if he's going to take part in this mission, it will be in that role. Even though she's surprised, Selma accepts his condition, because deep down she believes that if things get heated inside the labyrinth, Orhan Dura will return to being an enchanter to deal with the situation. Either way, if he decides to participate, he must go to the Silver Rabbits headquarters tomorrow morning. At nightfall, Orhan goes to the shop of an old man who, despite being close to closing, welcomes the boy warmly and offers him tea. After all, he feels enormous gratitude for all the promotion the boy gave the shop when he became a member of the Heroes Party, which boosted sales. Speaking of that, the boy apologizes to his grandfather before revealing that he's no longer part of the group. Even so, the elderly man says his gratitude for his grandson will never diminish, and that Orhan is still himself with or without that team. He knows very well how hard the boy worked to help, and that will never be forgotten. In the old man's opinion, people like his grandson are essential for society, and seeing how the boy struggles to accept compliments, he urges Orhan to receive such words of affection better whenever he hears them. Trusting his grandson's intuition and character, the grandfather asks him to do what he believes is right, because his journey is long and only just beginning. Therefore, Orhan should live for himself, but never stop helping others. Whatever happens, his grandfather will always be by his side. The next morning, Orhan Dura reports to the Silver Rabbits HQ. Seeing that he looks well, Selma asks if he feels relieved to have left the Heroes Party, and he answers that it's something like that. Next, Vince Brawers, the clan leader, thanks the young man for coming and admits he has heard quite a lot about him, including the unfortunate part about him leaving the hero's party. As for Orhan, he doesn't go into that subject and instead wants to know more about this teaching expedition. Selma then reminds him that in 3 days they'll be heading to the 51st floor of the Great Southern Labyrinth. Before reaching that level, they'll stop on the 21st floor on the first day, the 36th on the second day, and so on. In the middle of that explanation, we see an earlier moment when Selma told the leader of the rabbits about Orhan Dura's departure from the hero's party, and how she saw it as a terrible loss for the team, since they certainly wouldn't be as strong without Dura. Selma agreed, because the enchanter raised the team to another level with his support magic. Sure, Orhan's spells were less potent than average, but his enchantment speed was impressive 4 times faster than hers. On top of that, Selma had seen Orhan use original spells, and she noticed that he had great ability to analyze situations, predict the next move, and provide magical support at the right moment. He had every skill an enchanter needs. With his absence in the hero's party, Selma believed the Silver Rabbits would return to the top very soon. Hearing about that boy during the joint attack, Vince found it hard to believe that Orhan Dura had been discarded like that. But his subordinate explained that enchanters usually don't get the credit they deserve. She herself, because she's famous, ends up being overrated, while the truly powerful ones, like Orhan, are usually treated as if they're nothing. Returning to the present moment, after hearing all the details of the expedition, Orhan goes over the plan. There will be 10 groups of rookies and 5 escorts, including him and Selma. The rookies groups will take turns dealing with the monsters, and if something unusual happens, the escorts are the ones who must handle it. By the way, Orhan asks why only 5 escorts instead of more rank groups, since it would make sense to minimize the risks of the expedition, especially given how tight the schedule is and how it could put the beginners in danger. Selma answers that they really do want to take the rookies to the 51st floor, but that they need to go through some difficulty in order to truly grow during this mission. Orhan knows that isn't the real reason, though he has no idea what the real one is, and of course they wouldn't tell an outsider like him. Regardless, he offers his help and receives Vince Brawers' thanks. According to him, the enchanter's reward will be 2 gold coins now, and 10 more if the mission succeeds. Orhan thinks that's great, although he admits he found the payment excessive, since it's enough to cover a full year of expenses for an ordinary citizen. Selma points out that this is the value they see in him, so he promises to do his best. Hours later, Orhan Dura heads to the dungeon entrance where the excursion will take place, and the rookies are gathered, preparing for the start of the journey. When Selma and Sophia appear and greet him, he notices that the little girl's outfit is the same as before, probably the standard uniform for beginners. He also says she looks great in that outfit, making Sophia blush as she thanks him. While Selma can't handle the face her sister makes and sarcastically points out how well Orhan knows how to compliment a lady. Since they're already talking about knowing how to charm someone, Selma asks if the guy has a girlfriend. He scratches his head and says no. But since there were women on his old team, he probably learned how to deal with the opposite sex. Selma remembers that the hero's party used to live together in the same mansion, while Sophia asks where her friend is living now. He explains that he's living at an inn. Selma panics, trying to understand why her sister would want to know that, since it sounds like she might be planning to visit him. And the poor girl has to scramble to explain that she was just curious, changing the subject. Selma asks why Orhan is staying farther away from the rookies, and he explains that since he's an outsider, he chose to give them some distance to make the beginners even more anxious. Speaking of that, the enchanter asks him to help calm the group down, while she asks Sophia to go meet her team. Soon after, Orhan accompanies Selma as she approaches a trio of adventurers who will serve as escorts. The Silver Rabbit praises Orhan Dura and assures them he will be a great companion, and everyone believes it when such an important member of the group says that. Orhan, on the other hand, asks her not to put such high expectations on him, especially in front of the others. Finally, after Orhan says he's an attacker, the blue-haired man introduces himself as Anthem, a defender. Bernard, the other guy, is also a defender, while Kathy is the healer. Orhan thinks the group is well balanced, but if he hadn't come, someone would have had to make do as the attacker, and that makes the boy even more suspicious about this plan. Seeing the boy's reactions, Selma once again remembers that conversation she had with her leader. Vince said he understood how she felt for having lost such a powerful trump card, but reminded her that Orhan is an enchanter just like her. and thinking about the group's balance, he couldn't remain in the first squad. Even though she agreed, Selma lamented that her clan hadn't moved forward even a single step since last year, making her believe the Silver Rabbits wouldn't be able to regain what they had lost, and it was exactly for that reason that she invited Orhan Dura to participate in the expedition. Still, he only agreed to come if he were used as a swordsman, and all she hopes is that he truly works as a frontline attacker when things start getting intense. Finally, after saying goodbye to the escort group, Selma takes Orhan to the rookies to welcome them. Moving to the front and receiving everyone's full attention, the leader announces that today they will begin their descent toward the 51st floor of the Great Southern Labyrinth. She understands the young one's nervousness, since it's not easy to reach such a deep level of this dungeon so early in their careers, but she asks them not to worry, as she brought a powerful companion in case something outside the plan happens. In that case, she introduces Orhan Dura and reveals that he has already descended to the 94th floor, a place even central figures of the kingdom haven't reached, including Selma herself. The newcomers are impressed, and a murmur quickly spreads through the crowd about the man's incredible achievement. As if that weren't enough, even though Orhan asks Selma not to put so much pressure on him, she not only says he will be the main reference for everyone inside the dungeon, but also highlights the fact that he was once part of the hero's party, which immediately turns him into a kind of celebrity among the trainees. After the speech, Dura complains that the girl put him on a god-level pedestal of expectations, but she insists it was the best thing to do, since it's important work to help keep the rookies calm. The issue is that, in Orhan's mind, he only wants the title of hero if it's to help his grandfather in the shop, and he hopes this nonsense doesn't give him a headache. Anyway, Selma asks the boy to accompany Team 10, formed by the most promising newcomers, who, if they learn to work together, will easily reach the mid-floors. Selma holds her companion's hand to give him confidence, but he doesn't know if she should trust someone from outside that much. Be that as it may, Orhan Dur goes to the trio of newcomers that form Team 10, where Sophia is included. Orhan thought someone was missing, but upon learning that all the members of his team were indeed there, he starts thinking about how dangerous it is to form a team with so few rookies. The boy in the trio explains, full of charm, that no one can keep up with their pace, and Orhan worries about how this kid will turn out when he grows up if he's already this full of attitude at his age. He then asks his subordinates to introduce themselves. The boy says his name is Logan Hayward, the enchanter who will one day surpass Selma. Next, Caroline Inglot introduces herself as a defender. The escort notices that the girl has little equipment for the class she belongs to, but she explains that she is a defender who doesn't use armor or a shield, because she prefers dodging instead of blocking, since she can't even think about disgusting monsters touching her. But because she has a huge desire to kill all of them, she chose the class that allows her to get as close as possible to those enemies. Orhan points out that dodging attacks is much more difficult than protecting yourself with a shield, especially for someone without experience like Caroline, so he asks whether anyone in the clan opposed the girl's choice. Logan says yes, but that their companion simply ignored everyone and went ahead with her decision. This comment sparks an argument between the two, and to put an end to the foolishness, Dura asks the last member of the trio to introduce herself. So, Sophia Claudel says her name to everyone and identifies herself as a rear-line attack mage. When Sophia finishes speaking, Logan and Caroline start arguing again, and Orhan realizes this mission won't be easy at all. However, to his surprise, the kids go quiet as soon as they enter the labyrinth. Caroline asks what a member of the hero's party is doing on this expedition, since she thought their clans were rivals. As Selma had already said, Orhan reminds her that he is no longer part of that group, since it is a highly prestigious team. The girl insists on knowing why he left, but he refuses to answer in any way. Changing the subject, Caroline assumes that Sophia must already know the escort, because she said they would be accompanied by someone incredible. Caroline demands an answer from her colleague to know whether this is the incredible guy she mentioned. And when cornered, Sophia turns as red as her hair, but reveals that Orhan Dur saved her life, besides being very strong and having been part of the hero's party. She also says her sister told her she didn't need to worry because Dura would be there, not seeing himself as a hero at any moment. Even if the girl sees him that way, the enchanter wonders whether Selma only praised him like that to calm the sister down. Suddenly, two wolves that had been silently observing decide to leap at the adventurers, but they fall into a magical trap placed by Orhan along the path, which gives him certainty that he did the right thing preparing these devices along their route. especially to deal with enemies that attack from behind without spending too much time. After all, time is something they don't have much of, and if they're going to waste any, it should be on harder fights. Some time later, when Team 10 reaches the 20th floor, Orhan has watched his rookies fight enough to understand he won't have problems for the rest of the training expedition. Honestly, he thought Logan was just a cocky kid, but he really is a skilled enchanter. If he manages to perform well in longer battles, he will certainly be very useful in a ranked group in the future. However, even though he is a genius, he is terrible at giving orders, which is essential for his class, although he can develop this skill over time, of course. Caroline is indeed extremely fast, as a dodge-type defender requires, but she has two problems. The first is that she attacks impulsively and without thinking, and although she really does need to be the group's front line, the way she exposes herself is concerning. Second, Caroline uses only 2 daggers as her weapon, which certainly matches her style, but does not provide enough firepower for the group. Lastly, Sophia is not as impressive as the other two, but she is already stronger than a common rookie. She was a bit passive during the fights and failed by hesitating at certain moments, but that will change once she connects better with her teammates. Also, Sophia doesn't have any very notable weaknesses, which creates expectations regarding her future development. Meanwhile, with help from the 3 escorts, Selma's group defeats the boss of the 20th floor, then asks the newcomers to register the floor on their guild cards so the expedition can end for the day. With some free time, the Enchantress goes to Orhan to hear what he thought of the first day. He agrees that Team 10 has a lot of potential, but he regrets that they're not working very well together. He even admits he's especially worried about Caroline, although Selma insists the girl has improved a lot recently. That makes the boy wonder what she must have been like in the past if she still behaves this way today. The next day, Orhan Dura is shocked when he reads a front-page story in the newspaper about the new enchanter of the hero's party, which makes it public that Orhan was expelled from the team. Upset by the humiliation, he crushes the newspaper in his hands. He also fears that some rookie may have read the article and started seeing him differently, which is exactly what he doesn't want. When he leaves the inn and heads toward the meeting point, Dura is approached by a girl named Luna, whom he hasn't seen in a long time. Back in the hero's party, even when Orhan was treated worse and worse, Luna was the one who kept treating him kindly, just like always. And when he was expelled, she wasn't there. She had been away doing something for her family, and if she had been there, things probably would have turned out differently. Faced with yet another complicated issue involving his former team, Dura realizes how much this subject has really been consuming his mind. Luna practically begs her friend to come back to the party, but when he asks whether the others feel the same, she admits that she's the only one asking for the enchanter's return. Still, if Orhan decides to come back, she'll do everything she can to convince the others. Even though he's caught off guard, Orhan can see in Luna's eyes that she's serious, but he declares that it's already too late for that, especially after the article he just read. Hearing this, Luna takes his hand and reminds him that they promised to finish the Great Labyrinth together. But Orhan hardens his expression, pulls his hand away, and says that this was a promise the two of them made together with Oliver, and Oliver was the one who expelled him from the team, so that promise will never be fulfilled. With that, Orhan walks away, irritated, admitting to himself that he wanted the 3 of them to stay together forever, that he truly wanted them to fulfill what they promised. But there's no use crying over spilled milk. Orhan Dura no longer has anywhere to go back to. Continuing his walk, the boy reflected on how he had been expelled from the heroes group for being weak. That was even what the newspaper said. Orhan knew that at some point, a new member would join the group. But the truth is that he couldn't avoid feeling bad about it, even more so after that article, which called into question the credibility he had as an adventurer, something that could make it harder for him to find a new group. In fact, it wasn't just in Orhan's head that people would comment on the newspaper story. The rookies had found out about it and were talking among themselves about the case, including Logan, who began to question whether their instructor had really told the truth about his old group. At that moment, Orhan arrived and said good morning to the youths who, even though they tried to keep things the same, made it clear to the enchanter that the atmosphere was quite strange, especially after how much Selma had introduced him as if he were a god. Speaking of her, Selma came running and apologized for not knowing about the newspaper article. Orhan said she didn't need to apologize and that the expedition would be a failure if the leader lost her composure. The woman regretted not being more careful before using Dura as inspiration, but he was the one who apologized for not being completely honest. In any case, he kept his word that he would support the enchanter on this expedition, whatever happened. So she should keep her head held high as always. In a relaxed tone, Bernard stated that at least Orhan really had reached the 94th floor, and the other attendants reaffirmed that they still felt at ease with the company of someone so strong. In line with that, Selma highlighted that Orhan's work yesterday did not fall short in any way. In other words, everything was in its proper place and functioning as it should. Then, the three youths from Group 10 approached to wish the escort good morning, and he immediately brought up the subject of the newspaper. Sophia grumbled that the article was full of lies, just like Caroline said, but Logan wanted to know whether what was written there was true. Orhan confessed that most of it was true, which surprised the boy. By the way, the escort admitted that he really had been too weak and, even today, he is not the hero everyone expects. Sophia pointed out how strong the man was for having defeated more than a dozen orcs in the blink of an eye, and he acknowledged that he was strong enough to take the kids up to the 51st floor, and, even if he wasn't a hero, as an explorer, he promised to protect the three youths from any threat and hoped they would do their best, just as they had yesterday. Hearing that, Caroline and Sophia got excited for another day at Orhan's side. But Logan felt like a fool for getting excited. So, Group 10 reached the 21st floor of the Great Southern Labyrinth. The goal was to reach the 35th, but the escorts were not allowed to give any instructions to the rookies until they reached the middle floors, starting from the 31st. In other words, until then, the rookies would lead the exploration, which they had been doing very well up to the 29th floor. Or rather, Sophia and Caroline, because it was becoming increasingly obvious that Logan did not trust himself as an instructor. On the 31st floor, it was time for Orhan Dura to instruct the kids again, so he needed to stay alert. He sensed the presence of monsters ahead and asked everyone to get ready. When the goblins appeared, he told Caroline to draw their attention. Once again, the girl acted thoughtlessly and exposed herself more than necessary, which made the escort keep an eye on her. Next, he told Sophia to deal with the orcs at the rear, while Logan was supposed to use support magic. However, before Orhan finished speaking, Logan had already begun doing so, because, in his mind, the instructions Dura gave were the same that anyone would give, nothing different, so the boy wanted to confront his escort. With her buffs, Caroline handled the frontline goblins easily, but Sophia was trembling with fear at an orc that had appeared in front of her, probably because of the trauma she had suffered. Watching the scene from afar, Logan asked whether Orhan wasn't going to help the girl, and as the monster got closer and the escort didn't move, the boy came to the conclusion that he really couldn't count on him. Suddenly, Orhan cast an agility reduction on the orc and reassured Sophia, reminding her that she was accompanied by her teammates, so she should stay calm and do her best. Thus, Sophia focused and cast a powerful fire dart at the orc, leaving her companions impressed that she had used an advanced attack spell. Meanwhile, while Caroline hugged her friend for doing so well, Logan grew more and more confused by the whole situation. When they descended to the 35th floor, they faced a deadly tarantula, which Logan was sure they were not capable of defeating. On the other hand, Orhan told him to use agility increase and durability increase on Caroline, as well as boost Sophia's magic. The boy grumbled to himself that the instruction was the same as always, while Caroline once again repeated the behavior of charging forward carelessly. Logan panicked and ran after her, but Orhan told him to stay where he was, because the boy would be at a disadvantage if he went to the front line. That said, Orhan told Caroline to jump over the spider and slash its back. When the defender managed to do so with great agility, the escort told her to keep drawing the enemy's attention but to be careful with its venom. At that moment, Logan buffed his companion, making it easier for her to deal with the deadly tarantula's attacks. Orhan pointed out that the defender's mobility depended on Logan and that he should support her above all else. At the same time, he told Sophia to limit the spider's movements, so the mage cast Air Cutter, which sliced the creature's 4 right legs in half. Quickly, Orhan tells Logan to use the strength and technique boost on Caroline, but because the boy hesitated for a moment, thinking the fight was already won, that gave the spider enough time to wrap the defender in its web and start pulling her toward its mouth. Orhan advises the girl to cut the web with her daggers, and Logan starts to suspect that the guide gave that instruction because he already knew this was going to happen. Orhan tells Sophia to prepare a stone arrow, while the party's enchanter needs to cast another magic boost on Sophia, since the previous buff is about to end. While Caroline screams that she can't tear through the web, Orhan reflects that Logan can only use 3 spells at a time, so there's no helping it, the guide needs to step in. Right away, Dura casts Sharpening Boost to sharpen Caroline's daggers, allowing her to cut the web that was holding her with ease. Then he tells Sophia to take action, and she fires the stone arrow at the deadly tarantula, defeating the creature instantly. At the same moment, Caroline runs to celebrate with Sophia, while Orhan tells Logan that everything worked only because of his support magic. The boy, embarrassed, thanks him, but continues looking at the guide in a strange way as Orhan calls everyone to head back to the surface. After the day's expedition, Selma gathers the rookies at the dungeon entrance to announce that tomorrow is the last day, so everyone must rest to be in good condition. Later, while heading home, Orhan is called by Bernard and Anthem to grab something to eat. Orhan is surprised that the two don't seem bothered by him. In fact, Bernard celebrates when the enchanter agrees to go out with them. They hadn't had a chance to talk properly because of the rush of the expedition, and Dura thinks this might be a good opportunity. Meanwhile, Group 10 is being taken back to the city in a carriage. Logan brings up the topic of Sophia being saved by Orhan, according to what she had said, and the girl explains that he rescued her 3 days ago in a newly discovered labyrinth. Sounding somewhat agitated, the boy asks his companion to tell them everything about their guide, what spells he used, and how he fought. After thinking for a moment, Sophia remembers that Orhan used an incredible gust of wind and also strengthened his sword with support magic. Logan believes he used a Sharpening Boost, a spell used to buff weapons, not people. Caroline points out that this was the spell the instructor used on her today, which made her knives very sharp. Based on what was said, Logan understands that Orhan also knows how to use close combat weapons, and Sophia explains that he switched to a frontline attacker after being expelled from the hero's party. Hearing about Orhan's change, Logan is surprised, since the instructor behaved like a perfect enchanter earlier. On top of that, the boy recognizes that he felt angry because he thought Orhan had let him down. But during the battle against the orcs, Dura used Agility Reduction in secret, a type of debuff that even Selma rarely uses because it's extremely difficult, yet Orhan used it easily. Remembering the fight against the deadly tarantula, Logan realizes it was the first time he truly understood the importance of formations, because if the defender keeps the enemy distracted, the attacker and the supporter have space and time to focus on their roles. Orhan even seemed to know exactly when each buff would end. And he also predicted the spider's web attack, which can only mean one thing. Orhan Dura was reading the situation perfectly and giving the most appropriate instructions for each case. That makes him an excellent enchanter. But Logan doesn't understand why he switched to the front line. Maybe he really is a true genius, able to fight in such different ways, and the boy doesn't want to be left behind, so he promises to do his best to achieve his dream of becoming the greatest enchanter. Caroline comments that he has a scary look on his face, and he says he's just motivated for tomorrow. Later, when they arrive at the Silver Rabbit's Tavern, Bernard and Anthem insist on paying today's bill. Bernard assumes the enchanter must have celebrated a lot for having been part of the hero's party, but Orhan only remembers doing all the administrative work and not having time to have fun. Because of that, the other guides are outraged at the spiteful tone of that newspaper article, and Orhan thanks them for the empathy. Anthem asks if he really was the enchanter of that group, because when they met, Dura had said he was an attacker. Orhan explains that he switched to swordsman for good when he left the team. That is, he was already performing that role in the hero's party. And, being honest, he wanted that more than anyone. Influenced by his grandfather, who was also a swordsman. His grandfather had been an explorer, and long ago, when a gigantic monster appeared in their village, the man defeated the creature with a single sword. Seeing that made Dura want to be like him. When asked how he ended up becoming an enchanter, Orhan explains that it happened when the hero's party started descending deeper and deeper, and their pace began to drop. After all, with each floor they descended, the monsters became stronger, which led to the idea of looking for an enchanter to join the team, since that profession had been gaining a lot of attention at the time. But because Orhan was considered a jack of all trades and could do anything, he ended up being the one who had to switch classes. Anthem feels bad for him, but acknowledges his merit in leading the team all the way to the 94th floor, suggesting that the decision ended up being the right one. However, Orhan disagrees with a serious expression, saying that even though he switched, the group should have slowed down and grown stronger. When his companions ask what he means, he dodges the question and claims he's being too harsh on his old team. The truth is, as he thinks to himself, he can't say more than that. After all, the chance of the hero's party going beyond the 94th floor is 0. Since the guy was hiding his hand, Bernard changes the subject and asks what his ideal swordsman is like. Orhan answers that the best one is a jack of all trades who's effective at practically everything, the kind who can go from the lowest floors all the way up on his own. That's what he wants to be. Meanwhile, Caroline is taking a bath and laments that she and Sophia will have to say goodbye to Orhan after the last day of the expedition. Sophia also feels sad thinking about it and admits that she wishes he would stay with the silver rabbits. Since that's how she feels, Caroline advises her friend to ask him to stay, and although Sophia is sure it won't work, the defender insists that he might actually accept the girl's invitation just like her own sister did. Sophia replies that Orhan isn't like Selma, but either way, it really would be sad not to see the escort anymore, which makes the girl think that maybe she should make that request so she doesn't miss the opportunity. The next day, the heroes' party shows up at the dungeon entrance and draws the attention of all the adventurers who were there. While Oliver radiates confidence, Luna is visibly uncomfortable. Next, Orhan Dura approaches the newcomers for the last day in which he must report for this service. Excited, the three children welcome the instructor with joy, and Caroline admits she would be even happier if they received a reward for completing this mission. Logan asks what she would like to receive, and the girl looks at Sophia, who becomes extremely embarrassed because she knows exactly what she would like to receive in this case: for Orhan Dura to stay in the night sky silver rabbits. With nowhere to run, Sophia gathers the courage to confess what she wishes for. But she is interrupted when Orhan Dura is called somewhere else. While heading to the place he was summoned to, Orhan Dura hears two newcomers talking about how the hero party is going into the deeper part of the labyrinth today, starting from the 92nd floor to test the new formation. Hearing that, Orhan Dura thinks it would be much more prudent to run those tests on the upper floors, where the risk is lower. But he quickly tries to forget about it. Speaking of which, on the 92nd floor of the Great Southern Labyrinth, Oliver is determined to conquer this dungeon. After all, they no longer have a loser preventing victory. Not only the leader, but the other members also remain convinced that Orhan Dura was a burden to the team, except for Luna, of course, whom Oliver wants above all to convince that he was right from the beginning. 2 days earlier, Philly Carpenter had presented herself to the hero party full of enthusiasm in light of the great feats of this famous team. According to Oliver, Philly Carpenter is a talented adventurer who reached the 100th floor in the Great Western Labyrinth, and she will be the team's first real enchanter. Derek and Annalie were satisfied that they no longer had to rely on that guy from before. Philly Carpenter even thanked them for the welcome party, and Derek commented that now that they weren't stuck with that nuisance on the team, they had every reason to celebrate. In fact, he was even startled when he saw the curtains Orhan Dura managed and realized that the hero party had a lot of money. Philly Carpenter asks if that money wasn't meant to fund the group's activities, but Oliver asks them to stop talking about Orhan Dura, because today is the new enchanter's welcome party. In the middle of the party, Luna arrives running to deliver urgent news, and although she is surprised to see the new girl, she puts that aside to reveal that Orhan Dura is going into the Great Southern Labyrinth with the Night Sky Silver Rabbits. Immediately, the other members begin questioning how someone that useless could possibly enter such a powerful clan, while Luna demands to know what happened while she was gone. It is at that moment that she learns, through her teammates, that Orhan Dura was expelled from the team. Then the leader introduces the new enchanter. Luna remembers how clear she had been when she opposed replacing Orhan Dura, and Derek becomes irritated that she is ignoring the new member. Oliver calms the big guy down and argues that, as everyone already knew, Orhan Dura is not strong enough to be on this team. Luna, however, always disagrees strongly with that and sees that guy as the core of the hero party, believing that they only got as far as they did because of him, and that the team will not be able to move forward without Orhan Dura. Offended, Annalie stresses that the rest of the group disagrees about the jack of all trades, but either way, there was no point complaining anymore. Orhan Dura was out, and that was it. Faced with the facts, Luna ends up giving in and accepting that there really is nothing she can do now. Then Oliver sighs in relief and starts a discussion about the immediate plans, since this is Philly Carpenter's first day. This time, the plan would be to run a test with a newcomer on the 92nd floor in 2 days, and if everything went well, they would descend to the 94th. However, Luna opposes the plan because she has no intention of kicking the bucket. Once again, she offends the other members of the group while explaining that, although Philly Carpenter is a talented enchanter, it would be prudent for them to start from the easier floors and then go down. Derek and Annalie insist that the 92nd floor will be easy, but Luna reminds them that the black dragon is there, and that they almost got beaten last time they faced that creature. Even so, the team members radiate arrogance and continue blaming Orhandura, saying he was getting in the way of the rest of the team. Oliver tries to calm the situation by reminding them they would only be testing the new formation, and therefore would not fight the black dragon. But Derek and Annalie remain convinced that they should confront that monster. Luna continues insisting that it would be irresponsible to do that without Orhandura, but Oliver puts his foot down and imposes that the plan will be followed no matter what. And so, we return to the present moment, where the hero party faces powerful enemies, even though they still haven't synced with the new member of the team. At the moment, they face a kind of mammoth with impressive endurance. Oliver tries to cut the monster, but its tusks are long and prevent the adventurer from getting close. Failing, the leader retreats and lets Derek take the front line with his shield, while he feels his body becoming heavier as his buffs wear off. Knowing things will get ugly if this continues, he asks Philly Carpenter why the buffs keep ending, and the enchanter, visibly anxious, replies that she still doesn't quite understand how the companions fight. Immediately, this makes Oliver remember that Orhandura had understood everything in less than an hour on his first day. Meanwhile, Derek takes a burst of power from the mammoth and is almost thrown to the ground. Then he gets scolded by Annalie because she was nearly hit. Trying to keep up appearances, the tank knows he could easily block that kind of attack. But today it's complicated. Annalie responds with a sequence of fire bullets that don't even tickle the monsters so much, so that Oliver thinks the sorceress must be joking. However, the truth is that her attack power is really quite weak right now. Worried, Oliver tells Philly Carpenter to buff the mage. The enchanter had already done that, but she tries to reinforce the spell anyway. Annalie tests her strength again by repeating the fire bullets, but once again they cause no damage at all to the opponent. Increasingly incredulous, Oliver thinks about how Philly Carpenter's support magic should be far stronger than Orhandura's. Even so, Derek is suffering on the front line trying to withstand the mammoth's overwhelming power. So he asks the leader to do something. Coming back to the real world, Oliver tells Annalie to circle around to flank the enemy. But the monster immediately notices her movement and almost hits the mage, forcing her to retreat. Because of that, Oliver asks Philly Carpenter to watch the monster's next attack and warn the group. But she regretfully says she won't be able to do that. Oliver argues that an enchanter's duty is to understand the flow of the battle. But Philly Carpenter can only use support magic for now, which starts to irritate Annalie. The team's leader sees how much weaker they all seem and begins to panic because he can't understand why until Luna finally approaches to explain the reason for everyone's weakness. However, just as she is about to reveal it, the famous black dragon suddenly appears, intimidating everyone with its terrifying appearance and destructive aura, eyes bulging. Oliver points out that this dragon wasn't supposed to leave the floor boss area. Unconcerned, the winged monster stomps the mammoth like it was an insect. Its size is simply unbelievable. Luna shouts that they must retreat, but Derek and Annalie refuse, giving the final word. Oliver argues that they've beaten this monster before and can do it again. So they charge at the black dragon, which responds by spitting a fireball at Derek. Even though he raises his shield to protect himself, the human is still thrown across the ground by the sheer force. While Luna runs to heal him, Oliver questions why Philly Carpenter didn't buff the tank. But the harsh reality is that the enchanter is completely frozen with fear. Annalie fires a fire lance, but once again her magic has no effect at all on the enemy. Fortunately, when the dragon counterattacks, it ends up hitting a rock with its fireball instead of the girl directly. Though she still takes considerable damage, seeing the critical situation, Luna keeps insisting they should fall back, while Oliver struggles to concentrate amid the chaos and the looming possibility of everyone's death. When the black dragon begins charging its strongest power, the swordsman manages to snap Philly Carpenter back to her senses so she can cast a buff on him. Once she does, the team leader begins a magic convergence. Luna thinks he needs more convergence, but there's no time left for anything else. So Oliver casts Divine Flash, which collides with the black dragon's attack and causes an explosion. After that, the man sees that the monster remains completely untouched, and that's enough for him to understand that this battle cannot be won. Giving up, he finally asks Luna what they should do, but Luna reminds him that he's the leader and that he needs to pull himself together and get back into the fight. Still, seeing he's barely holding on, the girl says the only way out is to use the whimsical portal, a magical item used for emergency escapes that can only be activated inside a labyrinth. It creates a forced spatial connection between the place where it's used and another location. On the other hand, Philly Carpenter says that this item will send the group to a random floor boss area, either on an upper or lower floor, meaning they'll have to face another boss. Even so, Luna thinks it's better than fighting the Black Dragon, which is one of the strongest bosses. Therefore, Oliver pulls out the whimsical portal and throws it on the ground, opening the passage the party must enter. Struggling, the members move too slowly and are prevented from entering by the Black Dragon, which spits a stream of flames and, strangely enough, enters the portal alone. It closes right after the creature goes through. Derek feels relieved that they escaped, but Luna explains it's actually the worst thing that could have happened, because the Black Dragon might have ended up in a much weaker place where beginner adventurers could be attacked. For that reason, she plans to ask the guild to forcibly teleport everyone out. That's a function guild cards have, allowing people to be evacuated from labyrinths during critical moments like this, even believing they might face some punishment from the guild. Oliver decides to go forward with the plan and moves to the next step. But Luna reminds him that Derek and Annalie are injured and can't walk yet. As Luna heals the others, she says that when they request forced teleportation, they will have to fight the Black Dragon immediately, and she believes it would be wise to replace Philly Carpenter with Orhandura when that moment comes. Naturally, the other members resist the idea, so the girl explains that, just when she was about to say why the hero party was supposedly weaker, the truth is that everyone is as strong as they've always been. Nothing has changed. Oliver can't understand how that's possible, since even his strongest move, Divine Flash, didn't even scratch the dragon. According to Luna, the answer is simple: they don't have Orhandura anymore. For example, Oliver barely did any magic convergence earlier, which shows how weak his Divine Flash was under those circumstances. By the way, she asks if the leader knows what all support magic has in common. He replies that the amount an attribute is boosted depends on the caster, and the duration of the effect depends on the target. The enchanter must reapply the buff before it ends, and these support spells typically last about 3 minutes. Philly Carpenter explains that this would be correct, but all the members of the hero party have extremely high resistance to magic, so a buff doesn't last more than 2 minutes, especially for Oliver, who can't maintain one for even a full minute, even if the leader becomes furious at what he's hearing. Luna states that his body is incompatible with any enchanter. The issue is that Orhandura could squeeze milk from a stone and practically did the impossible. Oliver argues that Philly Carpenter should also be able to do that, since anyone is more talented than Orhandura. In response, Luna reminds him that Orhandura was aware of his own weaknesses, and that he developed original spells precisely to compensate for them. When they hear that the guy created his own magic, Oliver, Derek, and Annalie are stunned and refuse to believe it, but Luna assures them it's the truth. With that said, she stops the healing and reminds them that they don't have much time, so it's time to leave. Next, as they all run out of the labyrinth, Oliver remembers that Orhandura really had said something about creating original spells, but he was still much weaker than the other enchanters. Luna refutes this, since Orhandura was able to create a support spell that increases power by more than 50 times. Philly Carpenter thinks that's impossible, since even Selma of the Silver Rabbits can only manage a 10-fold increase. That makes Oliver realize that his Divine Flash depended on Orhandura's buffs to actually be strong, which Luna confirms. After all, both the swordsman's technique and Annalie's attack spells were literally 50 times stronger with Orhandura's support. This made Oliver arrogant, to the point that he stopped worrying so much about concentrating his magical energy when using that ability, and if he had focused a little more, he might have at least knocked down the Black Dragon. The same goes for Annalie, who could only use mediocre spells in that last fight, which made it clear that she can only cast her special ones with support from their jack-of-all-trades. Finally, Orhandura also helped with Derek's defense, mainly because his buffs affect equipment and spells as well, so when the support magic wore off, the party members didn't suddenly feel their bodies grow heavier. Sometime later, the heroes' party is spotted by adventurers outside. Oliver hears some people commenting on how they are heroes, but the boy rejects that title since they're putting all those adventurers in danger. Even so, it's true that they already defeated the Black Dragon once, and Oliver knows he did it with his own hands, so the heroes' party does not need Orhandura. Early the next morning, it was the last day of the expedition. Standing before his students, Orhandura explained that the goal was to go from the 36th to the 50th floor of the labyrinth. Then, once they reached the 51st floor, they should use the teleport crystals to return. Watching the cloudy sky, the instructor felt that something was wrong lingering in the air, and on the very day the event was coming to an end, maybe it was the weird way Logan was staring at him, but if he had to guess, Orhandura would say the problem was the Great Southern Labyrinth. Caroline, excited as ever, asked what kind of monsters they would encounter today, since she could barely wait to take them all down. Letting out a deep sigh, the tutor once again asked her not to run ahead like a lunatic, since she was a defender. Caroline argued that she needed to give everything she had on the front line to ease the burden on the rest of the group, and that this was why she chose that profession. But Orhandura made it clear that there was a limit to what a single person could do in a battle, and that it was important for her to start thinking of herself as part of the team, not as an independent element acting however she pleased. Caroline called the teacher annoying, so Logan scolded her, pointing out that Orhandura was only being kind and offering important advice, reminding her that even the famous Albert Sensible said teamwork was important. Orhandura questioned whether the boy really meant that Albert Sensible, and the name caught Selma Claudel's attention. Orhandura stated that Albert Sensible had been an absolute ace of the night sky silver rabbits, but unfortunately died fighting the black dragon on the 92nd floor. Caroline added, lowering her head, that Albert Sensible was killed while protecting a teammate who should have been protecting him, since they were the defender. According to her, the enchanter knew that if he died, everyone's smiles would disappear and nothing would remain. That was why you had to keep the people you were protecting away from you. Realizing Caroline's behavior was entirely connected to this, Orhandura chose not to interfere for now, since it was clearly something very deep-rooted in her mind. Instead, he smiled and said that everyone was counting on their defender in today's mission. She smiled back and accepted the responsibility. Sophia asked if the instructor also had something to say to help her improve, while Logan grew jealous and begged the leader to tell him how to become stronger. Later, on the 36th floor of the Great Southern Labyrinth, while the kids warmed up for what was coming, Selma Claudel approached Orhandura to comment that the boys seemed to have taken a liking to him. For his part, Orhandura had been worried about how they saw him after that newspaper story, but in the end, it seemed they had accepted him. Selma remarked that Caroline and Logan had the kind of talent that made trouble, but would have a bright future ahead. Changing the subject, she had heard them talking about Albert Sensible and said that losing him had been a great setback for the team at the time, and that this was exactly why the heroes group managed to pull ahead and conquer the Great Labyrinth. Orhandura replied that facing the Black Dragon had also been very difficult for them, and that they could easily have lost someone, just as Selma Claudel's team had. According to her, Albert Sensible had been someone they could always count on, which left a huge emptiness in everyone's heart. Smiling, Orhandura said he hoped they would find a replacement just as good, and Selma joked that he was pretending to be clueless, then asked what he thought. Orhan said a group didn't need two enchanters, especially if one of them was the best in the continent. Since Orhandura decided to become a swordsman, Selma hoped he would handle things well. However, he chose to do it. Next, on the 40th floor, Selma gathered the rookies to divide them into teams before facing that floor's boss. However, Team 10 ended up alone in this mission, which made Caroline worried and feeling isolated, although Logan thought it showed how much the higher-ups trusted them. Orhandura explained that there were several different paths through the labyrinth, so the kids needed to learn how to split up and find the floor boss. Even so, Caroline didn't like the idea of getting separated in a place like this, but Orhan emphasized that this was why it was important to gather information first. Adventurers would walk the floor several times to map it out, find the correct route, and share that information with others, which was why larger clans had an advantage. Caroline then said it was time for the professor to share what he knew with the rookies, since he had gone deeper into this labyrinth than anyone else. Logan thought it was a great idea to learn more about the creatures waiting for them in the more dangerous areas, and the instructor said that the lower floors started at the 76th and were like a snow-covered mountain. He tried explaining more about what happened down there, but the kids were so excited that they kept interrupting him with new questions until Orhandura completely lost his patience. Meanwhile, Lunar rushed into the Adventurers Guild and urgently demanded the guild master, since they needed to teleport everyone out of the Great Southern Labyrinth immediately. Back inside the dungeon, the kids' instincts told them something was wrong. They had walked a long time without encountering a single monster. Logan asked the instructor if it was normal for this floor to be like that, and he said no. Deep down, he felt the same sensation he'd had before entering this cavern, like the monsters were afraid of something. In the middle of this, Caroline couldn't stand waiting to fight anymore, until finally a monster appeared before them. As expected, the girl dashed straight toward it. The creature raised its club to strike her as soon as she got close. But before that could happen, Orhandura cast an agility reduction on it to make sure his student wouldn't get hurt. With the path clear, Caroline delivers 2 quick strikes that finish the creature off, then starts celebrating. Logan comments with concern that Azuro goblins are extremely fast and strong, and that if Orhandura hadn't cast a debuff on it, the story would have been different. Caroline doesn't want any moral lesson because she won, but Orhandura insists that the defender is the core of the group, and if she gets into trouble, Logan and Sophia will do anything to save their companion, which would put them in danger. The very thing she wants to avoid. Seeing that everyone is genuinely worried and disappointed, Caroline apologizes, while Orhandura explains that dodge-type defenders can use something called active defense, and since the girl can't settle down and focus on protection, he's going to teach her that technique. It's a method of drawing enemy attacks and then restricting them. For example, every living being physically prepares before attacking, like taking a step forward before throwing a punch. If Caroline cuts the attacker's leg at that moment, he won't be able to take the step he needs to attack. Therefore, if she can read the enemy's movements and strike the exact point they use to commit to an attack, the defender can prevent damage to the team. Excited, Caroline is sure this will be her trump card to always act on the front line. Though Orhandura says the goal is not to defeat enemies, reminding her that her role is to draw their attention and stop their actions. Returning to the guild alongside the entire heroes party, Luna asks the director for a forced teleport. The man says the mana cost for something like that is enormous and that he needs an excellent justification to use it. So the woman explains that the Black Dragon, the boss of the 92nd floor, transported itself through a whimsical portal to a far less advanced floor, meaning it could run into rookies at any moment. The clerk beside them argues that a conference is required to make a decision of that level. But Luna raises her voice to say there's no time for that, because no one in the labyrinth has any idea what is happening. Inside the dungeon, Logan doesn't want the instructor talking only about Caroline anymore, so he asks to learn something too, like a debuff or something similar. Orhandura reminds him that debuffs are extremely advanced spells and are more influenced by the target's attributes than buffs are. Therefore, the boy needs to know exactly what the target's magical resistance is and adjust the spell accordingly. Floor bosses as well as the powerful monsters they will encounter from the 61st floor onward will almost never be affected. In fact, even adventurers who can use this type of spell usually don't, because they're not very efficient, and if Logan wants to use them, he'll need to figure out the magical resistance of every creature in the deep floors. The boy is completely discouraged by this bucket of cold water, while Orhandura emphasizes that the boy's priority should be mastering the buffs he already knows and gaining more experience. So, instead, Orhandura is going to teach him to use magic in a fun way, and asks him to look behind him. When he does, Logan sees 2 wolves falling into a magical trap and being violently impaled by powerful spears. Frightened, the children ask when he placed that trap there, and he says he has been preparing traps all along the path since they entered the labyrinth. The lesson is, if Logan can avoid being attacked from behind, the group can focus only on what comes from ahead. After all, it's also the enchanter's job to use these traps to restrain enemy attacks and create a favorable battlefield for his team. Grateful for the lesson, Logan's eyes shine as he realizes that this guy is the kind of enchanter he wants to be. Lastly, Orhandura turns to Sophia. At the Adventurers Guild, they begin the forced teleport, but it will take time to gather the mana needed for the spell. One of the casters says it will all be Oliver's fault for allowing this to happen. But Derek and Annalie protest, saying they didn't do anything wrong. An argument is about to break out, but the guildmaster orders everyone to focus on the spell, because many lives are at stake. Luna, in turn, thinks that Orhandura may be in danger. Speaking of him, the instructor says Sophia needs parallel construction, the ability to use 2 or more spells at the same time, something every high-level mage must be able to do. It seems difficult, but once she gets used to it, the girl will manage at least 2 at once, since there are people who can cast dozens. Sophia thought that simply using special rank magic was enough to be an advanced mage, and Orhandura says that the deeper they go into the labyrinth, most monsters cannot be defeated with a single special rank spell, and even if she tries using several in sequence, that takes time she won't have when dealing with stronger enemies. That's where parallel construction comes in. It consists of starting a second spell when the first is only halfway through. optimizing the wasted time so she can attack efficiently. Still, a mage isn't made only of advanced spells. Even weaker spells have their importance when used at the right time. In the instructor's opinion, the student is strong enough to fight on the intermediate floors, so she should ask the veterans of the Sky Knight Silver Rabbits to teach her something. For example, Selma Claudel, her sister, being honest and embarrassed about it. Sophia admits she would rather have Orhan Dura teach her instead of her sister, thinking about how Selma Claudel will react when he tells her that Orhan Dura thinks it's better to ask Selma for permission first. But even so, Sophia is pleased, since her sister does everything she asks. During all of this, the forced teleportation spell is ready, but it still needs to be filled with mana. Only when that is done will the magic actually be able to be cast. At the same time, the guild master states that the hero's party must defeat the Black Dragon. Derek and Annalie straight up chicken out, especially after the last fight they had, but Luna accepts the mission without thinking twice. However, before that, she makes a request to the master. Meanwhile, after opening the floor boss's gate, Selma Claudel tells the newcomers to wait in the safe zone while the escorts handle things. With that, the more experienced adventurers face the main enemy of this floor, and everyone is counting on Orhan Dura's reputation to make it out alive. Taking responsibility, the enchanter guarantees that he will provide the support needed for the fight to end in just a few minutes, something Anthem doesn't seem very confident about. In any case, while the newcomers protect themselves at the back of the room, Orhan Dura quickly moves forward and lands a cut on the giant's thigh with his sword, and Caroline notices that he reproduced what he taught her earlier: active defense. After taking the hit, the giant steps back a few paces and falls into a magic trap that raises a stone wall, which makes Logan realize that the instructor cut off the enemy's escape route after predicting its movements. At the same time, Selma Claudel begins a parallel construction, casting several spells at once, something Sophia watches with her own eyes for the first time. During the fight, when Bernard blocks an attack with his shield, Anthem takes advantage of the opening in the giant's guard to land a powerful sword strike that ends the battle. Based on what they saw, Team 10 understood in practice the things Orhan Dura had been telling them earlier, making them grasp the true meaning of teamwork. Running toward the Great Southern Labyrinth with the hero's party, Oliver asks why Luna asked the guild master to remove people from floors 40 to 51st, and she explains it's because Orhan Dura must be there. Annalie doesn't understand what that has to do with the jack-of-all-trades guy, and Luna replies that the hero's party is currently the weakest S-rank team. In other words, they have no chance of facing the Black Dragon alone. Derek gets pissed at her statement, but she stands by it, saying it's impossible to fight without Orhan Dura in this confrontation. Later, at the 50th floor boss, Selma Claudel leaves the initiative to Orhan Dura, because if he cuts the crab's claws, only the shell will be left for the rest, giving them time to kill the thing and still head back to celebrate. Orhan Dura jokes that she makes it sound easy, but she answers that for him, it really is. Bernard asks whether he's really going to go in alone against a giant crab, but Orhan Dura shows no anxiety as he charges in and uses his impact ability to destroy the opponent's claws. This is an original spell created by the enchanter, which increases the strength, magic, and hardness of a piece of equipment by up to 100 times for a single instant. Since this is a kind of cheat he accidentally invented while trying to solve a problem with his magic. The man feels a bit guilty using it, but he needs to survive at all costs on the lower floors. Then, with the crab weakened, the other party members launch their attacks with Selma Claudel's enhancements and completely destroy the enemy. After the victory, the organizer and leader of the expedition praises everyone for their performance over these 3 long days, then announces that it's time to go home. However, the Black Dragon suddenly appears in that boss room, terrifying the adventurers present. Check out these videos appearing on your screen and subscribe so you don't miss the next part.